Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. A key therapy for treating COVID-19 symptoms is in short supply, and states can only get it through the federal government. At the same time, prices are going up for a popular at-home test kit. Snow in the Big Apple today. It's the first time the city is blanketed in white this winter. Two storms merged and hit New York overnight. The Colorado fire damaged a church in Louisville and burned down the homes of many church members, but the disaster didn't stop them from worshiping. After tennis star Novak Djokovic was denied entry into Australia for the Grand Slam event, supporters gather outside of his quarantine hotel to voice their concern. Top officials from the U.S. and Japan are boosting cooperation on defense and research. That's in light of China's growing aggressiveness in disputed waters. It took some time, but New York City is finally seeing snow today. That's because two storms hit the Big Apple at once. NTD's Arian Pastar has more from Times Square.
For the first time this winter, snow is lying over Times Square. Now it takes more than just cold weather for it to snow here. Earlier this week we had frozen rain, but today two storms collided, setting the stage for a white New York City. It snowed throughout the night up until 8 a.m. this morning. City workers could be seen doing their best keeping the snow off the streets at Penn Station as well as at Times Square. And as it so often happens when it snows in New York, the slush on the streets already started accumulating. So what do the tourists think about snow in New York? Are you happy that it's snowing?
Yes, very happy, because I come from a place, from Greece, where we don't have so many snow.
Well, I love it. It's romantic, kind of, but a little bit nasty as well.
Who cares? I got on waterproof shoes. It's like no big deal. Man, check out the Solomons.
It looks pretty, so we're happy.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
According to city data, every inch of snow will cost the city between $1 to $5 million to clean up. Even though every inch of snow costs the city millions of dollars, most people still enjoy a little snow during winter. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
Winter weather caused a multi-car pileup in western Kentucky on Thursday as forecasters watched the system head east. Kentucky State Police said ice and snow had covered the highway in Elizabethtown at the time. About 20 vehicles ended up colliding, and more cars slid off the highway. The Western Kentucky Parkway was closed in both directions as crews worked to clean up the mess. Luckily, only minor injuries were reported. Elizabethtown police posted on Facebook that road conditions are bad and rapidly getting worse. Meanwhile, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear declared a state of emergency Thursday evening due to the heavy snowfall. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, heavy snow caused multiple vehicles to crash on a highway, creating a massive traffic jam in the process. Vehicles were left at a standstill on the I-40 highway on Thursday for around an hour, according to eyewitness Caitlin Jones. She says she saw around 30 to 40 broken down vehicles during her drive. Authorities urged locals to avoid driving and to stay home if possible. Local media outlet News Channel 5 reported multiple crashes due to snow-covered roads across the Middle Tennessee region. A key treatment for COVID-19 is in short supply in the U.S. It's been a year since monoclonal antibody therapies were authorized. This has some people asking whether the government's focus on vaccines is sidelining this treatment. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
The federal government's supply of monoclonal antibodies is still limited, even though it's the only authorized outpatient treatment for preventing the worsening of COVID-19 symptoms in high-risk patients. The monoclonal antibody treatment hasn't been given as much attention as COVID-19 vaccines have. This has led to low demand. But since the rise of the Delta variant and waning vaccine effectiveness, demand for monoclonal antibody therapies has increased. In an op-ed in USA Today, NYU professor of medicine Dr. Mark Siegel said the brand of monoclonal antibodies most effective against the Omicron variant is almost impossible to find in most states. Right now, states cannot buy the treatments directly from companies that make them. They have to go through the federal government, which distributes them. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is asking for more doses. He says the federal government has, quote, cornered the entire market of the drugs. We reached out to the Biden administration for comment, but haven't heard back. Meanwhile, prices are going up for a popular at-home COVID test. Walmart and Kroger have raised prices for the Binax Now COVID-19 rapid tests. Last year, they agreed to a short-term deal with the Biden administration to sell the test kits for $14, but that expired in December. Now Walmart is selling the test kits for $19.98, while Kroger is selling them for $23.99. In December, President Biden vowed to make 500 million free and deliverable at-home tests available through a new government website. It's expected to roll out sometime this month. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
People infected with the Omicron variant have a far smaller chance of dying or visiting the ICU than those infected with Delta. That's according to a new study. And now that the CDC's shortened the quarantine time for some, Walmart cuts back on its COVID sick leave time for employees. Meanwhile, in Chicago, public school classes are canceled over a union feud involving virus control measures. A Canadian study adds to findings that show the Omicron variant is much less severe than Delta. The study was published in medRxiv. It found that the risk of being admitted to the intensive care unit or dying in Omicron cases is 83% lower than in Delta cases, and hospitalizations are 65% lower for people who contract Omicron. Looking at the retail industry, Walmart sent a memo to employees on Tuesday. It informed workers that the company is cutting its COVID-related paid sick leave in half for COVID-positive workers from 2 weeks down to 1. It mirrors guidance by the CDC that asymptomatic people should quarantine for 5 days instead of 10. And over in Chicago, public schools have canceled classes for the third straight day. Fox News reports that the closures are the result of a battle between the school district and the teachers' union. The feud involves virus safety measures as well as remote learning. The union wants all students and staff to test negative before returning to school. But Mayor Lori Lightfoot said the district won't do that and that the union is holding students' education hostage. A parent expresses her concern with the union's Tuesday vote to switch to remote learning amid the area's surge in COVID-19 cases.
And it's just really devastating for, as a parent, to just see my kids have to suffer remote learning again because they don't learn anything. They stare at a screen, they check out. I mean, they're in little breakout rooms with their friends just chatting away. It's like there's no education.
The school system CEO Pedro Martinez told parents to keep their kids home until their school principal gives the go-ahead. He says schools are the safest place for students and that they are working tirelessly to reopen classes. Johnson & Johnson says its single-dose vaccine protects against breakthrough COVID-19 for up to 6 months. It says this is longer than the protection offered by the 2-dose Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Citing a study that it sponsored, Johnson & Johnson said that protection against infection from its single-dose vaccine starts to wane only from the 4th month. And it says that protection starts to wane in the 2nd month in the 2-dose vaccines from competitors. Those vaccines use mRNA technology. The J&J shot uses an adenovirus. The study was conducted before the Omicron variant was discovered. It was published in a medical journal, but hasn't been peer-reviewed. The company said the study was carried out by collecting claims and laboratory data covering 168 million people. J&J's Executive Vice President of Pharmaceuticals says despite the study being completed before the spread of Omicron, the J&J shot produces a strong enough antibody response that is consistent across variants, including Omicron. Will your company require you to get a COVID-19 vaccine or get tested every week? That's what the Supreme Court is considering starting this morning. In fact, they'll be looking at 2 of the federal government's vaccine mandates. What they decide could have long-term implications beyond vaccines.
The vaccine mandate debate front and center. Today, the Supreme Court will consider 2 of President Joe Biden's controversial COVID-19 vaccine mandates, the vaccine or testing requirement for employees of large businesses, and the vaccine mandate for healthcare providers who get funding through Medicare or Medicaid. If you're thinking, wait, hasn't the Supreme Court already decided on some of these mandates? You're right, they have. But these cases are a bit different because they involve federal agencies, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and whether they have the kind of authority to issue these mandates. The states challenging them believe the mandates are unconstitutional because they disregard state sovereignty. The Department of Justice will argue the mandates are critical to the country's COVID-19 response and recovery. With White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying the need and urgency for these policies is greater than ever, and we are confident in the legal authority for both policies. The Supreme Court will have to determine whether the mandates should take effect while the questions of legality and constitutionality continue to play out. Whatever the justices decide, it might foreshadow the way the court could handle future cases regarding executive power.
Lawmakers, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, paid tribute to police officers and officials who defended the Capitol during the January 6th breach a year ago. They held candles and observed a moment of silence, and a band played patriotic music at the steps of the Capitol building. 5 people died a year ago in the hours-long incident. This includes 1 police officer who died after battling rioters and 1 protester who was shot by police. Around 140 police officers were injured. U.S. prosecutors have brought criminal charges against at least 725 people. Some lawmakers and media outlets have characterized the event as an insurrection, but none of the people involved have been charged with insurrection. A January 5th opinion article in the Wall Street Journal says the events that day did not meet the legal or dictionary definition of the term, calling it a false narrative. The 3 men convicted of killing Ahmaud Arbery will find out how much time they'll spend behind bars. Travis McMichael, his father Greg McMichael, and William Bryan faced decades in prison. This for killing Ahmaud Arbery as he ran through their South Georgia neighborhood in early 2020. The men will also be tried on separate federal hate crime charges. Jury selection is in that case scheduled to begin next month. They've all pleaded not guilty. A Colorado church suffered extensive smoke damage in the wildfire. Both the pastor and the congregation have lost their homes in the disaster, but they haven't lost their faith.
Bill Stevens is a pastor of Ascent Community Church in Louisville. The devastating Colorado fire took his home and the homes of his congregation. He barely had time to grieve.
I'm trying my best to take care of the congregation. At the same time, we're dealing with the fact that our own house is gone.
The church itself survived the fire, but suffered extensive smoke damage. Volunteers spent a whole day removing holiday decorations. Most of them still reeked of smoke. For several weeks, church members won't be able to hold services here. But the pastor said the wildfire won't stop them from worshiping. They'll hold Sunday services at a local hotel until the church is ready to reopen. It's been a roller coaster of emotions for the community.
Moment, you'll be doing fine, and then you'll be driving down the road and you'll start crying.
He said at least 17 members of the church lost their homes.
So, and really it's the 17 people that have lost their home, but it's also all the people that have been displaced and the people that have a ton of smoke damage, the ones that are trying to figure out, did their pipes burst when they turned off the electricity? And it's just a community it's all been rocked by this. So.
At a disaster assistance center, Stevens picked up a $500 check from the Red Cross. Like other fire victims, he's now moving ahead toward recovery and rebuilding.
President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden are traveling to Colorado today to survey damage from the Marshall Fire. The fire burned more than 6,000 acres and destroyed nearly 1,000 homes and businesses. Biden will be joined by Governor Jared Polis and Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse in Boulder County. Last weekend, Biden approved a request from the governor to declare the fire scene a major disaster. The designation unlocks federal relief funding. And a fire at a Philadelphia row house killed 12 people, including 8 children. It's the city's deadliest fire in over a century. The head of the city's housing authority is downplaying the home's overcrowded conditions.
The question of why there are so many families, let me be very clear. This is not unique to Philadelphia. 3 generations living under the same roofs. This was, in fact, an intact family who chose to live together.
26 people lived in the 3-story brick building, which is part of public housing. Officials are still trying to determine the cause of Wednesday morning's fire. They say the fire scene is complex and that it will take time to determine what happened. Jeremiah says a housing census last year reported a lower number of people living there. He also says an inspection last year found sufficient smoke detectors and that his agency installed carbon monoxide detectors with 10-year batteries. After Novak Djokovic was denied entry into Australia for the Grand Slam tournament, supporters gathered outside of his quarantine hotel to voice their concern for the #1 player in the world. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the latest.
Dozens of supporters rallied outside a Melbourne hotel where Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic is being held on Friday, amid a dispute over a vaccine medical exemption he received.
I think it's terrible to keep him here in detention center. I mean, he doesn't deserve that. He should be somewhere else, you know, like a hotel or any other facilities, a private house or something. I mean, I don't look. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't think that he done such a bad thing to be held in a detention center.
Even amid heavy rain, protesters danced, chanted, and waved banners, declaring their love for the 20-time Grand Slam champion.
He plays fair, he plays fierce, and he plays it hard. And he's just a very, very good athlete, and he should not be locked up. If there's any differences of any kind, it should be fixed up.
Djokovic was granted the exemption following a review by 2 independent medical panels prior to boarding his flight. But upon landing in Melbourne for this month's Australian Open, he was denied entry. The Serbian is currently holed up in a hotel for immigration detainees after his lawyers filed an appeal, which is expected to be heard on Monday. Djokovic even received support from one of his fiercest critics, fellow tennis player Nick Kyrgios, who wrote on Twitter, "I definitely believe in taking action. I got vaccinated because of others and for my mom's health. But how we are handling Novak's situation is bad, really bad. Like these memes, headlines, this is one of our great champions, but at the end of the day, he is human. Do better." Djokovic has consistently refused to disclose his vaccination status, while publicly criticizing vaccine mandates. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Tennis star Novak Djokovic is in visa limbo in Melbourne, Australia. That's in the state of Victoria. A member of the state's parliament, David Limbrick, spoke to NTD about the incident. Limbrick said that before Djokovic arrived, a federal vaccine advisory group and Tennis Australia had met and agreed that the athlete's vaccine exemption was valid. But Limbrick says the documentation wasn't in order when Djokovic arrived, and now he'll have to wait until at least Monday to find out if the court will accept his exemption and let him stay in the country.
He apparently went through some sort of consultation with officials in Australia before he came, and he had a medical exemption for vaccination. Now, he hasn't revealed his vaccination status, and apparently when he arrived in Australia, our Border Force Patrol, our border forces, said that his documentation wasn't in order. And so what's that's meant is that his visa was cancelled when he arrived, and he was sort of held in sort of this questioning room for 5 or 6 hours. And then he was taken away to a hotel, which is effectively a detention centre where I believe he's still at now.
So, David, let's talk about the hotel, the Park Hotel Melbourne, where Djokovic is being held. Some media reports show that there have been squalid conditions there, maggots, fires, COVID-19 outbreaks. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, well, I mean, this hotel has been used. There's been another situation where there's been some asylum seekers held there. They're still held there. They've been held in detention for 9 years in some cases. And it's quite a shameful situation for Australia, I think, in many ways, where we've had these people seeking asylum held in a hotel for such an incredibly long period of time. And now we have who should be, an international star, a guest, coming to play, the best tennis player in the world. He's coming to play in an international tournament in Australia. And, we've treated him like this as well. And I just think it's just such an embarrassment for Australia to be in this situation.
Well, Djokovic's father told reporters that his son is the victim of a political agenda. He says Australia is keeping his son in captivity to stomp on the Serbian people. What's your reaction to this?
Look, there may be some sort of political agenda. I don't think it's got anything to do with, attacking the Serbian people, and I don't think it's got anything to do with that. But certainly there's been a lot of talk between, the federal and state governments about, maintaining strong borders and this type of thing. So, I don't think that there's any sort of international agenda here. It's more of a domestic agenda. We've got a federal election playing out probably in the first half of next year. And I think the federal government, wants to show that they're, tough on enforcing border rules and things like this. So, I think that's maybe where it's at there.
New York City's new police commissioner wants to bring a fresh perspective while acknowledging the department's incredible sense of tradition. Keishant Soul, who was sworn in on New Year's Day, wants the city to be safer and the residents to have a better quality of life.
I want the police department to collaborate with the community because they're part of the community. So a year from now, I would certainly like to see those be a little bit more in the forefront, and I would like the public to know that the police department is working for them.
Soul started with the department as a patrol officer in 1997. She worked her way up the ranks to become a precinct commander. She also headed the department's Bureau of Major Cases and served as Nassau County's chief hostage negotiator.
I think leadership prepares you to be able to tackle anything that comes your way. I look forward to what I can learn from the NYPD and being able to bring what I already have to the table.
Soul was named Nassau's chief of detectives in September 2020, overseeing a staff of about 350 people. The NYPD has about 35,000 officers. The 49-year-old replaces Dermot Shea, who retired from the NYPD after 30 years, having spent the last 2 as commissioner. The city of Beverly Hills is joining the effort to recall the Los Angeles district attorney. City council members gave their perspectives and took a vote on the issue during a council meeting. We hear more from NTD's Cynthia Kai.
The Beverly Hills City Council voted unanimously on January 4th to support the recall of Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon. In a statement following the vote, Beverly Hills spokesperson Keith Sterling cited the recent rise in smash-and-grab theft and other crimes throughout the city. Gascon's office and the Beverly Hills Police Department did not respond to requests for a comment by airtime. During the meeting, the police chief expressed concern over several of Gascon's special directives.
That's not surprising because one of the special directives, number 2007, declining the declination policy directive, lists 12 serious misdemeanor crimes that essentially the DA's office will not file on if there's no extenuating circumstance.
For 1 year up to December 7th, 2021, Chief Steinbruch said the police department filed 839 cases, 346 of which were misdemeanors. The DA's office rejected almost 200 of the cases filed. The vice mayor attributes the lack of criminal prosecution to Gascon.
If you're going to do a crime in our city, we will catch you. The problem is, as I see it, under this district attorney, we'll catch you, and this district attorney will release you.
The mayor says the current situation cannot wait until the next scheduled election.
It has reached a point that the safety of our residents, also of our businesses, is being imperiled by District Attorney Gascon's policies, and he has not been responsive to calls to change those policies.
Under Gascon's leadership, city policies eliminate cash bail for some crimes, do not prosecute suspects for misdemeanor crimes, and prison sentences have been reduced for hate, guns, and gangs.
This all came because, as voters, we did not understand the consequences of Gascon AB 109, which we didn't vote for, but our electeds did in Sacramento, Props 47 and Prop 57, which actually passed the general electorate. We have to be careful going forward that that stuff doesn't happen again.
A group of victims of crimes launched the Recall Gascon Now effort on December 6, 2021, and is the second attempt to remove him from office after the first failed to collect enough signatures. If the county approves this new recall petition, organizers will have 160 days to collect more than 580,000 signatures from registered voters to put the recall on the ballot. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
Veterans, active duty military, and Gold Star families will get lifetime access to national parks and other federal lands without paying a dime. The Alexander Lofgren Veterans and Parks Act legalized the right last month. It was signed into law with the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. The bill honors Alexander Lofgren, a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. He died after being stranded in Death Valley National Park during a camping trip with his girlfriend in April 2021. Representative Marionette Miller Meeks later introduced the legislation into the House. In a statement sent to the Epic Times, she said, "We can never fully repay our veterans for their service and sacrifice, but we want to show our gratitude by giving them lifetime access to America's beautiful landscapes." Patrick Murray, legislative director of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, said the act is a slam dunk. A Trump-linked social media app called Truth Social is expected to launch in about a month and a half. It's backed by the former president's media company, the Trump Media and Technology Group. According to the service's listing on Apple's App Store, it will debut on February 21st. News of the planned launch comes roughly a year after major social media platforms suspended Trump after the January 6 Capitol breach. Truth Social bills itself as a challenger to Facebook and Twitter. It pledges to offer users profiles, a news feed, and search functionality, plus notifications. The Trump Media and Technology Group teased the app last month. Former Republican Congressman Devin Nunes quit his job in the House of Representatives to become the firm's CEO. Just ahead, color-changing cars are becoming a reality. BMW is unveiling the world's first color-changing vehicle, complete with a technology called e-ink. All that and more in just a moment. SpaceX has launched a Falcon 9 rocket carrying the next batch of 49 Starlink satellites. This for the company's Internet Satellite Constellation System. The rocket took off from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Falcon 9's first stage booster supporting this mission previously launched GPS 3.4, GPS 3.5, and Inspiration 4. Starlink is a satellite-based global internet system that SpaceX has been building for years. It will bring internet access to underserved areas of the world. Thursday's mission was SpaceX's first launch of 2022. Have you ever imagined cars that can change colors? It's now a reality. BMW has just unveiled the world's first color-changing car at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Let's take a look.
The concept car, called the BMW iX Flow, uses e-ink technology to produce fluid color changes. When stimulated by electrical signals, the e-ink technology brings different color pigments to the surface of the car.
It's the material we know from e-readers, so from Kindles. So it's the reason why you can read your Kindles so nicely in the sun, because there's actual color change going on there. So we took this material, it's kind of a thick paper, and our challenge was to get this on a 3D object like our cars.
The driver would have the option of changing the color from within the cabin, or by using an app, or even through hand gestures.
Okay, so now I'm switching it with the app to various effects. So now it's white. We switch it to a darker color, and now back to white, and we'll put it into bi-color mode. So the top's lighter and the bottom is darker.
Drivers would also be able to choose different colors to influence sunlight reflections.
On a hot sunny day like today, you could switch the color white to reflect sunlight. On a cold day, you could switch it black to absorb the heat, support climate control, and support sustainability. And the awesome thing about this technology, it's bistable. So if you switch it white, take the power off, it stays white. So it doesn't need any energy to hold any given color.
It's not yet clear if it's legal to change the color of a registered vehicle. BMW says the legality of it will have to be discussed. The technology is still in its early days. The current model displayed at CES can only turn gray and white, but BMW plans to cover a wide color spectrum.
Los Angeles County is working to host the Super Bowl without crowd restrictions. The announcement comes the same day the county warned that Super Bowl parties can be COVID-19 superspreader events. Los Angeles County says it's working with the NFL to have no health limits on attendance for the February 13th Super Bowl. The game is set for SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. The county's health department told the Epic Times that it can't guarantee there will be no restrictions on crowds, but it says it doesn't anticipate crowd capacity limits for sporting events. But the department issued a public warning about attending Super Bowl parties. It advises fans to enjoy the Super Bowl without putting friends, family, and neighbors at risk. Officials say these kinds of gatherings in the past have resulted in a tragic surge in COVID-19 cases. Two companies have agreed to jointly pay over $900,000 for allegedly selling the U.S. government shipping containers made in China. The U.S. Defense Department contracted the companies for materials made in America or in specified allied countries like South Korea. But the companies violated the False Claims Act and sold the government Chinese shipping containers falsely labeled as coming from South Korea. According to the law, the companies are liable to pay double the amount in government damages, as well as a $2,000 penalty for each false claim. The companies are Connecticut-based Sono and New York-based ARC. Both companies allegedly had an unnamed third-party company change the identifying plates on 100 shipping containers. The Justice Department says on 2 other contracts, Sono's supplier used Chinese steel. The U.S.-Japan 2+2 virtual conference kicked off on Thursday. 2 major steps will lead to deeper defense ties between Washington and Tokyo. That's amid mounting aggression from China and increasing tensions over Taiwan.
Good evening and good morning.
Addressing the virtual meeting, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the allies will sign 2 major agreements. Together, they'll work to bolster U.S.-Japan cooperation in defense.
We'll sign a new 5-year host nation support framework that will invest greater resources to deepen our military readiness and interoperability.
This framework will cover the continued basing of U.S. troops in Japan. There will also be further collaboration in the field of military research.
And we're launching a new research and development agreement that will make it easier for our scientists, for our engineers, and program managers to collaborate on emerging defense-related issues, from countering hypersonic threats to advancing space-based capabilities.
He cited North Korea's launch of a hypersonic missile earlier this week. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, still recovering from a COVID-19 infection, joined the meeting from home.
We know how strong that alliance is today. It remains the cornerstone of peace and prosperity in the region. And we're rightly proud that it's built upon a foundation of not just common interests, but also shared values.
Japanese Defense Minister Nobuo Kishi said the U.S.-Japan alliance is crucial at the moment in the face of provocative actions by the Chinese regime.
We shared concerns that China's efforts to undermine the rule-based order raised various challenges for the region and the international community. Japan and the United States have reaffirmed the resolve to work together to deter and, if necessary, respond to destabilizing activities in the region.
Kishi reiterated the importance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Prior to the Thursday meeting, Japan signed a security pact with Australia. The move was seen as a response to China's increasing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region.
The U.S. Justice Department says a Chinese national pleaded guilty on Thursday in a federal court. He was charged with conspiring to steal trade secrets from agricultural company Monsanto to benefit the Chinese regime. Shanghai Ta worked for Monsanto and a subsidiary from 2008 to 2017. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit economic espionage. He is scheduled to be sentenced on April 7th. Xi'an faces a maximum of 15 years in prison. In June 2017, Xi'an was waiting to board a flight to China when federal officials found him carrying intellectual property developed by Monsanto. Xi'an was allowed to fly to China, and he worked for China's Institute of Soil Science, but he was arrested when he returned to the U.S. The situation in China's Xi'an city is heating up as residents face highly strict lockdown orders. Some of them say they're suffering more from the prevention measures than they are from the virus itself. 2 women reportedly lost their unborn babies after several hospitals refused to treat them, while a man was made to confess on camera for the crime of buying food for his family. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on the story.
In an earlier report, we covered one Xi'an resident's tragic loss. The woman had been 8 months pregnant when she lost her unborn child. That's after a local hospital refused to treat her due to pandemic regulations. Now, reports say another pregnant woman has lost her child due to local lockdown restrictions. The mother-to-be posted her story online Wednesday, saying she lost her baby because multiple hospitals refused to take her in, despite being in critical condition. She first noticed she was bleeding at around 10 a.m. that morning. Her husband immediately called 120, China's version of dialing 911 for emergency services in the U.S. But he couldn't get through. Her community then connected her with local police officers, who sent her to a provincial hospital. But the hospital turned her away, despite her contact tracing health code indicating she had not come into contact with the infection. That's because she lives in an area labeled high risk for virus exposure. Based on that hospital's suggestion, the woman sought help from another local health facility, but was refused yet again. This time she was turned away because her health code indicated she hadn't had contact with the virus, and the smaller hospital was only accepting patients who had been exposed. The woman's husband called several more clinics, but none would accept her. The couple was forced to return home. On their way at around 3 p.m., the woman started bleeding again. Later that day, they finally found a private maternity hospital that would treat her, but it was too late. Sharing her story online, the woman wrote, "That day was my nightmare. That day I lost heart for the city I once loved." She also voiced sympathy and understanding for the mother who had lost her child days ago, describing how that woman was forced to wait outside a hospital for over 2 hours while bleeding, all because her most recent virus test results had expired 4 hours prior. She miscarried while waiting. The first incident fueled outrage online. Since then, local health officials have apologized for their negligence and vowed to rectify the situation. But the second mother's similar tragedy struck just days later. Amid one of China's strictest ever lockdown policies, a man in the city of Xi'an was forced to confess on camera his crime: sneaking out to buy food for his family. As part of Beijing's zero-COVID policy, residents in Xi'an are banned from leaving their homes, even to buy groceries. That's amid a recent pandemic surge there. In the video, a community service volunteer first introduced himself. Then, gesturing to a man standing behind him, the volunteer accused him of escaping quarantine. He went on to call the man's purpose for violating the ban unclear. The man was then ordered to read an apology on camera, saying, quote, "I realized my behaviors were ridiculous." He explained there isn't much food left at home and had wanted to get out to buy some. He also pointed out it's been difficult for locals to purchase goods online. At that point, the volunteer steps up. He states that vegetables were just delivered to over 2,000 households in the community, emphasizing the goods come, quote, "with loving care from our government." The volunteer questioned the man about whether he, too, had received the produce. The man just nodded without saying anything. The volunteer then criticized the man's escape, mimicking a typical Chinese communist tactic. Facing the camera, he yelled, "
国家不会同意，政府不会同意，我们工作者更不会同意."
He threatened to send the man to the police if he attempted to leave his home again. The video has since appeared online, attracting a number of comments. One comment, seemingly laced with sarcasm, reads, "One great thing about the Chinese Communist Party is that it gives dregs of society the opportunity to do evil." Another internet user likened the volunteer's actions and approach to tactics used during China's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s and 70s. Writing, "A scene from the Cultural Revolution has reappeared, a struggle session and confessions of guilt." The 10-year Cultural Revolution was a major political upheaval in China, led by former Communist Party leader Mao Zedong. It sought to purge traditional culture and thinking and targeted those who stood against Maoism and the ideas of Chinese communism. Another comment left on the video appears to express further concern, saying a society without human rights is truly terrible.
Coming up, the global computing power of the Bitcoin network falls as Kazakhstan's internet shut down this week during a deadly uprising. The Central Asian country had been the world's second largest center for Bitcoin mining. Germany is expected to tighten its virus measures for those who haven't received a booster shot. A rule being considered would require them to test negative before dining at restaurants. All that and more here on NTD News. The global computing power of the Bitcoin network has dropped sharply as Kazakhstan's internet shut down this week during a deadly uprising. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Last year, Kazakhstan became the world's second largest center for Bitcoin mining after the US, but the internet was shut down across the country on Wednesday. The move likely prevented Kazakhstan-based miners from accessing the Bitcoin network.
And as the internet was shut off on Wednesday, the global computing power of Bitcoin slumped pretty dramatically. That, in theory, makes it easier for miners to produce Bitcoin, and it might lead in the future to more Bitcoin coming to the market. And that, in theory, would create downward pressure on Bitcoin prices.
Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are created or mined by high-powered computers, usually at data centers in different parts of the world. The more miners on the network, the greater the amount of computer power is needed to mine new Bitcoin. Bitcoin on Friday slumped as much as 5% to its lowest since late September, falling under $41,000 amid a broader sell-off for cryptocurrencies.
As with everything in the cryptocurrency world, Bitcoin mining is rather an opaque industry. It's quite difficult to actually get data or clear statistics regarding the size of cryptocurrency mining. That said, a report from the University of Cambridge last year showed that in August, Kazakhstan accounted for about 20% of Bitcoin's global computing power.
The country's uprising began with protests in the west of the country against a New Year's Day fuel price hike. Security forces appeared to have reclaimed the streets of Kazakhstan's main city on Friday after days of violence. The Russian-backed president said he had ordered his troops to shoot to kill to put down the uprising. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is meeting today with leaders from the country's 16 states. Discussions will center on new measures to curb the Omicron variant. According to a draft proposal, a negative COVID test will be required for those who haven't had a booster shot in order to enter bars or restaurants. People who've had the booster shot would no longer have to quarantine for 14 days after coming into contact with Omicron patients. The new measures come as the country works to facilitate booster vaccinations. Local leaders have complained about what they call a chaotic vaccine rollout. For now, restrictions vary from place to place in Germany, especially for those who haven't received a booster shot. Germany's vaccination rate is lower than other countries in Western Europe. 71% of the population has been fully vaccinated, 41% has received booster shots. Germany has reported more than 56,000 new infections today. The British Prime Minister says he wants a voluntary approach to vaccination, accusing other countries in Europe of coercion. Earlier, he said that vaccines won't be made mandatory for all. However, since last November, vaccination was made a condition of employment for care home staff in England, and all healthcare workers will be required to be fully vaccinated from this April. Johnson also hit out at people for putting out what he called nonsense about the vaccine on social media. Venice canceled its traditional Epiphany Regatta as Italy is fighting against a rise in COVID-19 cases, but rowers dressed up as old women and steered their boats in the canals anyway.
Every year, Venice's oldest rowers dress up like Befana, an old witch in Italian folklore who's thought to bring gifts to children, almost like Santa Claus. In this getup, they participate in a short regatta, or boat race, on the Grand Canal to celebrate the Feast of the Epiphany. This year, with new restrictions on gatherings, Venice canceled the event to avoid crowds on the canals. But since rowing dressed like a Befana is not a crime, members of the oldest rowing club of Venice, the Bucentoro, decided to row on their own, disguised as old witches in an amateur regatta without prizes or finish lines. According to the Italian tradition, the Befana brings gifts in memory of those offered by the three wise men to baby Jesus. The traditional regatta dates back to 1978. It started from a competition between two rowers of the Bucentoro Club, who challenged each other to prove their rowing skills.
Zookeepers in Miami are celebrating the new year with another new addition. Take a look. Bald eagles, Ron and Rita, hatched their third chick Thursday. The first one came on New Year's Day. Ron and Rita have spent months nesting their eggs. Local conservation and rescue organizations teamed up to build an artificial platform for them. Their original one was destroyed during a storm. Raising 3 eaglets is rare because they are often aggressive toward one another. The youngest is already at a disadvantage because it's significantly smaller and weaker than its siblings. But the zoo says it will not interfere and let nature take its course. A stolen dog in the UK has made her way back home 8 years after she was taken from her owner, and she came back with 3 surprises. The dog is a Cocker Spaniel named Cassie. She met her rightful owner for the first time since 2013. More than that, she brought along 3 puppies said to be hers. Sussex police found Cassie harmed after a series of raids in November. A tip from the public provided clues. The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was also involved in assistance efforts. Cassie's family had been warned that she might not be the same dog in their memories. But Cassie has settled in, enjoying her daily dog walks. The family describes her return as a priceless Christmas gift. Sussex police said that although it is rare for dogs to be stolen, owners should take precautions like getting their pets microchipped. Sleep problems are common, but the good news is they're often easily cured. Understanding the root cause of your insomnia is the first step to getting a good night's sleep. Here's Gina Marie, who brings us Strong Mind and Body.
A good night's sleep is crucial for a healthy and productive day, and it's also crucial for a good and healthy life. Now, a simple way to understand why we sleep is to think of what our bodies do when we exercise. After a time, we get tired and have to rest our aching muscles. We may sit down, drink some water, or eat an apple. We feel rested and then resume our activities. We need to rest because we burn and use energy. The brain works the same way. When we think, read, or speak, we use energy. There are biochemical waste products that build up even in our brains. The brain needs to rest through sleeping. This allows the brain to get rid of those biochemical wastes and recoup that energy. Our brain needs rest in the form of sleep in a similar way to how our muscles need rest after exercising. The amount of sleep we need each night adjusts as we age. On average, babies require 14 to 17 hours a day, teenagers require 8 to 10 hours a day, and adults require 7 to 9 hours a day. It's interesting how many of us have no problem sleeping when we're on vacation. That tells us a great deal about the root of sleeplessness. For those with insomnia, simple things usually work. Start by having a regular sleep schedule. In other words, go to bed and get up at the same times each day. The body loves routine. Try to avoid long naps during the day. Limit alcohol near bedtime. The reason is alcohol may initially be sedating, but as it's metabolized, it negatively affects sleep patterns. Another tip is to avoid caffeine after lunch. Caffeine can stay in your system for a long time and can affect sleep. Another tip is exercising about 4 to 6 hours before bedtime, as that can facilitate a good night's sleep. What's key is to avoid strenuous exercise just before bed. There are plenty of over-the-counter medications and herbal remedies that can be tried. Try a hot mug of chamomile tea. It's a very relaxing herb to enjoy before bed. Prescription medication should be a last resort and only for a short period of time. Dealing with sleep issues will keep your brain working its best. It will also help you face the challenges of the day. So, if you can't sleep, take action.
Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.